Guys, I'd like to welcome a new guest to the podcast, Tudor Dixon. You'll remember Tudor Dixon. She ran for governor of Michigan the last time around. She's someone who's built a career in Michigan's steel industry. By the way, she's also a breast cancer survivor, a working mom of 4 girls. You can follow her at Twitter, at Tudor Dixon, Tudor Dixon. And Tudor, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. I want to start by asking you to clarify a mystery as I've been following, Gretchen Whitmer over the last few years, admittedly watching Michigan from the outside. I just don't understand the appeal of this woman. She seems to have all these horrific policies. In fact, you made very effective critiques of them. Does she have a sort of secret cadre of enthusiasts in Michigan? Is Michigan more to the left than the rest of us suspect? What's your thought about how Gretchen Whitmer even manages to survive given her destructive policies?
Sure. Well, I think that we have to remember that Michigan is a part of the obsession for Democrats. They're looking at Michigan as they can take it over. And we saw that very strongly in 22. They have a system on the ground here. So no, I don't think it is that she has some overwhelming appeal. She's certainly not drawing big crowds, but I think that is where Republicans are sometimes misled by what our success will be, is that we are playing to crowds. We are campaigning. We're out there actually talking to people. And you'll notice that the Democrats aren't. When you ask yourself, well, why is that? They have this massive ground game. And it's not just that they're going door to door. When we talk about a ground game, they're getting into your social media. They're getting into your phone. They're just very effective getting those messages out to people that were unsuspecting. People who are not necessarily following politics suddenly have this in their telephone and they're looking at it and they're going, oh, well, my cell phone is telling me to vote for this person. I better get out there and do that. And that's effective. We are not as effective on the Republican side at doing that.
I mean, it seems that what you're saying, and this gets me to the re-election of Ronna McDaniel, is that the Republican Party needs to do things differently than it did in 2020 or 2022. And I think part of what you're saying is to recognize that the Democrats have built this effective apparatus. Would you also say that you think that when it comes to things like early voting, ballot harvesting, if ballot harvesting is allowed by law, that Republicans should realize, hey, listen, we've got to play by the rules as they exist. You might, in some fanciful world, want to have one election day, everybody shows up, paper ballots, but whether or not you think that's the ideal, if your legislature hasn't passed that law in Michigan, then play by the rules of the game as they exist now. Do you agree with that?
Right. And that has been extremely hard to convince some people, especially even now when I go around, I'll still talk to groups and they'll say to me, well, we've got to change this. We've got to make sure it's on one day. And I say, look, that's not what it is right now. So we have to go to the very edge, just like they are going to the very edge, and make sure that what we're doing is within the law, but we're going to that extreme of going to people's stores, making sure that we are sending out the absentee ballot applications like they are. And right now I have Republicans who will say to me, well, I think that's not moral. And I'm like, but it's legal. You have to understand that if it's legal and they're doing it, we have to be playing at the same game. I'll say to them, I hear a lot of you saying, well, we're going to go to the grocery store and ask people if they're Republicans. This is a data game. It is also a mail-in ballot game. It is an early voting game. We have to be playing that game. We don't want to be going into a drone war with bows and arrows. We want to make sure that we have the same weapons that the Democrats have and that we are playing on a level playing field.
I mean, when I think, for example, about what happened in Arizona and kind of leaving aside whether there was any hanky-panky, it seems that Republicans in some ways shot themselves in the foot because they were like, listen, everybody show up to vote on election day. So if whether intentional or unintentional, there are glitches on election day, well, who's that going to hurt? The people who are voting on that day. If Republicans had done early voting, they'd have a much better chance of having done better. And these elections were so close that you can easily see them tipping the other way under those circumstances. Dude, let's turn to some.
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
I think you have to also remember that the Democrats are looking at this as a business and they're saying, okay, is it feasible to say everybody's going to remember on election day. People aren't going to get sick. There's not going to be an emergency at home. You never know what's going to happen if you limit yourself to one day. So they are not limiting themselves to one day. In Michigan now, I think it's at least 9 days of early voting. That was just passed in the last election. And so you have to think about this. They are making sure that they are contacting that voter constantly. They're getting in, like I said, they're in their cell phones. They're targeting them with ads. They're making sure they're getting mailings to their house. They're also knocking on their door. They're saying, we know you got your ballot this day. Have you turned it in? They are counting ballots. We are looking to bring voters to the table, and we're doing it the wrong way. We have these big rallies and people go, oh my goodness, this gubernatorial candidate had a rally with 1,500 people. Well, guess what? That same day, the Democrats, they targeted 4 million. So we have to be able to do it the same way.
Wow. That's really eye-opening. Is it also the case that the Democrats are using paid operatives, whereas Republicans rely on volunteers? Is that a factor? In other words, there needs to just be a lot more, as you say, the business of politics and the business of electioneering, as opposed to kind of well-meaning citizens who kind of show up and do their part. It's not that we don't need that, but we might also need the other, right?
Absolutely. I like to say that you've got a lot of Republicans that are out there talking and going on television and making a big deal out of elections, whereas on the Democrat side, you have these nameless, faceless organizations that hire people. They have people on university campuses. They have people in nursing homes. They have people in communities, community organizing. These are not volunteers, as you said. These are paid people, and this is the money that we don't really see. So as much money as we see in elections, we're not necessarily understanding how much money is going into these nameless, faceless organizations. They don't want to be famous. They don't want to have a big name attached to them. They don't actually want people to know what they're doing. They want to be able to be out there running the business of elections. It's much different.
Very scary. All right, let's take a pause. When we come back, let's talk about some issues in Michigan. Back with Tudor Dixon.